Chase Ewoldt was a typical 2-year-old when doctors diagnosed him with terminal cancer. His mom, Ellie, is an author and popular blogger who reveals how God uses his grace and others to sustain us during dark and painful times. Good to have you back with us today, Ellie. And for friends that might not have seen your interview yesterday, go check it out on harvest-tv.com. But a quick little synopsis here of that moment when all of a sudden you knew something just wasn't right.
Well, Chase was diagnosed, as you said, when he was 2, and we had several doctor's appointments and things like that, and he finally had a seizure, and that was the moment when
that was when you knew something was...
Exactly. Yeah. The emergency room doctor actually came back in and said, there's a large mass.
Yeah.
And those were the words that effectively changed our lives.
Wow. How did, yesterday we heard quite a bit about your story, and your family, but Chase particularly, how did he react to all this and kind of find a way through?
Chase is nothing if not resilient. He's incredible, and I think many times we and the doctors too have taken our all of our cues from him. He's, in some ways, people will weep and say, "Oh, a child being ill," and it's true that it is terrible. But in some ways, they're so much more resilient than you or I would be. Chase was up, with stitches 5 days after a massive brain surgery, and his pain was controlled by nothing but Tylenol. I think I would have just gotten out of the bed, last week, or something like that. And so he has such a joy for life, and that set our tone.
You say here that cancer could kill Chase, but the chemotherapy definitely would. Unwrap that for us, because that's a dilemma.
Very much so. And I reverse it all the time, but it's that the cancer definitely would, and the chemotherapy
may.
Yeah, that there was a chance that it may. Because Chase's cancer is a little bit of a newer diagnosis on the field, there are not very many treatment options. And so what's available to children like Chase is a very, very intense regimen that at the time Chase was diagnosed was not even available in all countries for all children, because sometimes the treatment itself would be terminal.
Ellie, it's clear to me that you're not in denial about your son's diagnosis, not at all. But you have chosen to live every day, moment by moment, with the joy and grace that God provides for you daily. That's difficult for a lot of people to do. Kind of speak to that, because there's someone who's watching who has cancer and, kind of looks at the big picture of what's going to happen to me instead of living in the moment.
I had to smile just a little bit, Valerie, when you said that, because the truth is my palms are sweating, and I'm a mom who's more comfortable in yoga pants, who's probably a little bit of a hot mess, and so I don't want anyone ever to look at makeup or getting to sit here and talk with you guys and say, oh well,
just got it all together.
I know, right? let's dispel that right now. But I do think just living in that moment by moment grace and not being afraid to be authentic in it. Seek community around you and be as open as you desire to be. For me, this is what felt comfortable. Writing is my catharsis. As someone in a community, it was a way to communicate with people around me. That might not feel right for everyone, but yeah.
Sorry?
Oh no, I was just going to say, seek out those times to kind of breathe in and breathe out in your life.
Yeah. You also talk about the fact that there might be a new kind of normal in our lives, and that kind of perspective, or embracing it, is okay.
Very much so. As a matter of fact, I'd love to tell you that I learned that lesson in cancer, and it was a once and done, and the credits rolled, and it's beautiful and everything else now. And there's a new lightsaber dent in my living room even this week, and I'm relearning a new normal with little kids that, it shouldn't be stressful, but even those getting the kids on the bus on time. Chase had back-to-back eye surgeries earlier this spring as he was losing vision. I feel like normal is pretty much just a setting on a washing machine, and we kind of keep redefining it.
What about look at your children, they're so precious. What about his siblings? How are they handling this and this moment by moment with them as well?
that is kind of it's an evolving process with them, which the best thing I can say is to keep dialoguing. That's what we keep doing, saying, how are you doing today? We're part parent, part counselors. We just figure it out, because what a blood draw and chemo meant when they were 2, 3, and 5, you know, it means something totally different as they're 10, 6, and 7, they're all in the same grade school, and the older kids hear other children making fun of their very short brother who has very little hair. You know, and so it's just an evolution of communication, saying, how are you doing today? What does God want you to learn in this today? I desire to protect my children from pain, and I can't do that in this, so the best I can do is teach them how to cope with it.
What were some of the biggest, or what was the biggest lesson, maybe, one of the biggest lessons that you learned from Chase during this whole process?
I'm learning from Chase all the time, but I think that one of the things that I've learned from him, oh, see, that's a hard question. There are so many, but I love how he uses his words to comfort. He would be in pre-op and he would recite Joshua 1:9. Be strong and of good courage, for the Lord our God is with us. And that was, most of his memory had been removed, you know, from the tumor, and he's regained some of it. But that ability to preach to yourself, not just listen to yourself or anxious thoughts, but to preach to yourself.
Encourage yourself in the Lord.
Exactly.
Kinda. Yeah.
Exactly.
So Matt Redman's 10,000 Reasons is now the rally cry for little Chase. Kind of tell us about that, and how did you guys connect with him?
We had been listening to the song constantly, and after Chase woke up from, he had a really bad stint post one of his chemos, and he was nearly unconscious for several days with fevers, and he woke up and asked for his song, and we figured out it was 10,000 Reasons, because we've been listening to it nonstop. And that kind of became, much like a professional athlete listens to music, you know, before a game, that kind of became his psych up thing. He'd listen to it on the way to the hospital. And through kind of an interesting series of events, we had the opportunity to meet Matt Redman, who's just an absolutely amazing man of God and has several boys himself, so he totally got the energy of our family. You know, he got down on his knees with Chase and said, okay, who's better, Spider-Man or Batman? And
Well,
Chase was like,
I could kind of tell by he seems to be a real Spider-Man fan.
yeah, very much so, very much so. Yeah, so I think it started as he liked red, but now it's actually evolved into he likes the character.
The character, yeah. Now, Chase Away Cancer is kind of the story. When did you decide to not go public, but really put this down on paper? And what are your expectations or hopes for the work?
Well, Bob and I made the decision together after I received a call from a friend who said, hey, I hope you don't mind, I sent your blog to several publishing companies.
Oh.
So in truth, one of my 2015 goals was more along the lines of get the laundry folded before the children need to wear it again. But the Lord instead in that year presented the opportunity to write a book. And I think the reason I said yes to it, it goes with my hope for it, and just that it would encourage people. It is a cancer story, but it's also a life story. It's about finding encouragement, finding hope, living in that moment by moment. And it details things, even like I said, you know, buying a house for us was, you know, a stressful minute, those kinds of things where I hope to learn the lessons and then realize I'm still learning. This isn't a done thing yet.
Yeah.
And tell us about Chase becoming a little spokeskid or spokesperson for an organization. I know that September is Pediatric Cancer Awareness Month. So, I mean, what an opportunity for a 6-year-old.
We're so thankful. And he goes around, he'll walk around saying, I'm an ambassador. Mom, you should let me watch this or let me do this in the house because I'm an ambassador. So we're very honored to be asked by the St. Baldrick's Foundation to represent them. They are an organization specifically geared towards raising monies for research. They actually put the monies in the hands of the doctors. Chase's neuro-oncologist, his attending neuro-oncologist, is a St. Baldrick scholar who is granted research that Chase is actually participating in. And so that was kind of our heart in this, beyond encouraging others, was to look, particularly given what Chase has been through, to try and help with research and give better options so that hopefully someday parents won't have to hear the things that we heard.
Ellie, we've just got a minute or so left. For someone today that's watching and they're really struggling, and maybe it is with cancer, cancer in a child or a loved one, maybe it's something else. What would your word of encouragement be to them to let them know that, you know what, with God all things are possible and everything could be okay?
The first thing I would say to someone is that you are so brave. I think that God gives us so much more strength than we realize in that minute, because we can feel torn
So we're
down.
braver than we know.
Exactly. Through his strength. The other thing I would say is just drawing from Exodus 14, a verse that's been very precious to me, where God said, you have only to sit back and watch me work. You can be silent. And so your times of difficult circumstances may not always be action oriented, but God is faithful.
Yeah. So be still and know that I am God.
Amen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ellie Ewoldt joining us today. Chase Away Cancer is the story. And to connect with Eli and pick up a copy for yourself, you can go to chaseawaycancer.com, or as always, go to our website, harvest-tv.com, for a link back to Ellie's site. And you might as well sign up and get her blog as well. Coming up later, Pastor Charles with your praise reports. But up next, we're going to hear from Brian Bush with the latest news coming out of Israel. We'll be right back.